9 minutes after 7 o'clock in Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome back to the second half of Morning Edition. Again, we know you have many options in your morning, and we do appreciate the fact that you have chosen Morning Edition once again. Joining us now is the CEO of the Environmental Management Authority, Dr. Joth Singh. Dr. Joth Singh. Let me get it right, because I've been mispronouncing it for a long time, and Dr. Singh was kind enough to give me the proper pronunciation. So it's Dr. Joth Singh to address the increasing number of dengue cases being reported in Trinidad and Tobago and what we can do to prevent it. And what we'll also be talking about the nomination of the new chairman of the EMA, former Energy Minister Kelvin Ramnath. I seem to be mispronouncing everything this morning. He's joining us via telephone. Good morning to you, Dr. Singh. Good to have you on the program.
Very good to be
Mr. Ramnath, very good morning to you. Good to have you with us.
Well, happy good morning to you and to Dr. Joth Singh, very efficient CEO of the Environmental Management Authority.
Let me put this question, the obvious question to you right away, Mr. Ramnath. When people say someone with a background in energy, it doesn't square with the green focus of environmental management. How do you respond to that? Mr. Ramnath?
Yes.
It seems as if we might be having some telecommunication problem, might be the line dropping in and out, but we will try and re-establish contact with Mr. Ramnath in a moment. And while we wait for Mr. Ramnath to get back online to continue our dialogue, we can't let this interview segment go by without asking for your own reaction to the sad passing of the recent chairman, Professor Julian S, who died yesterday.
Yes, it's very, very sad. It's sad for the nation. Professor Kenny, certainly I think everyone would accept an icon in Trinidad and Tobago, particularly within the environmental movement. And you know, when we heard of his passing yesterday, we were of course surprised because we didn't realize that he was ill. It seemed that it was a sudden occurrence. And then of course very quickly realized that we had lost an icon, a true soldier in Trinidad and Tobago, someone who has campaigned for environmental protection, not only here but in the Caribbean as well. And of course recognizing that loss, but of course then moving on and realizing that we have had someone who has made a major contribution to Trinidad and Tobago. He has identified how we need to do business, not only as far as the environment is concerned, but in the context of sustainable development, taking into consideration environmental issues. And Prof. Kenny, I think it is well, I think sound to say that he was the father of the green movement in Trinidad and Tobago. And I think we are really, really sorry to note that he has passed on, but I think we need to reflect on the contributions that he has made.
Do you feel a sense of sadness that he has passed on, probably with a sense of regret that in the manner in which he left the EMA?
Well, I'm sure that he was disappointed, and he had shared with me that he had looked to certain things to be achieved during his tenure at the EMA. One of those being the quarrying issue and reinstating jurisdiction to the Environmental Management Authority for all sizes of quarries. And I know he was disappointed and made the decision to leave. Recognizing as well that Prof. Kenny has been involved in many different things. He's a prolific writer, and I know he was engaged in his last book, and I hope that he did manage to complete that. I think we need to look forward and see how can we meet some of these objectives that he had set, and specifically on the quarrying issue. And I will share with you that the Minister of Housing and Environment, Dr. Rudal Munilal, as well as the Minister of Energy and Energy Affairs, Minister Ramnath, have indicated their full support for having that issue reinstated in jurisdiction of the EMA. So we are hoping and expecting that when Parliament is reconvened, that it might be one of the first issues that will be brought for the attention of Parliament, and therefore have that issue addressed. It took a while to get to that point. Certainly we would have wanted to have had it done during his tenure at the EMA, and certainly during the period that he was still with us. But I think it is important that we move in that direction, and I think that's going to happen.
Well, I think we've been able to re-establish contact with Mr. Ramnath. Are you hearing us clearly, sir?
I am hearing you clearly. Are you hearing me?
Yes, I am. And if I may get your own reaction to the passing of the man you've succeeded as chairman of the EMA, Professor Julian S, your own reaction to that?
Well, I want to share the sentiments of Dr. Singh, but to also state that he had an extraordinary passion for the environment, and one thing that was very clear is that as much as he was deeply concerned about the impacts on the environment, he did so with an air of dignity, dealing with criticisms in a manner that very few people would. And I'm sure that people who are talking about the environment today will take a page out of his book in terms of how you proceed to deal with issues affecting the environment in Trinidad and Tobago. I also want to express to his family and close relatives our deep condolences on the passing of Professor Kenny. I know that he will be deeply missed, not only by his professional colleagues, but by those who have rallied, with whom he has rallied over a lot of issues in the country.
If I may return to the question that I asked you originally before we lost contact, and the line might have been dropping in and out at the time, that you, with your background in energy and energy-based industries as a former energy minister during the time of the UNC in office, do you see it as a contradiction to have someone like yourself now at the head of an organization that is primarily responsible with preserving certain elements of the environment?
Absolutely not, Fazir. We are talking in this country about sustainable development. We are talking about a balance between development, industrial development, and ensuring the protection of the environment. And I think that coming from such a background which involves heavy industry, and also being intimately involved in setting up environmental management systems in the country's largest industry, Petrotrin, I think that I can make a valuable contribution, listening to both sides and finding the middle so that the country can have both environmental protection and industrial development.
Of course, one of the pillars of the People's Partnership in this whole energy and environment debate that goes on, as Dr. Singh mentioned, was the whole question of returning a significant level of control under the EMA for the level of quarrying. Do you see that at the top of your agenda? Because it is something that was promised by the People's Partnership.
Well, certainly, and we have been assured by Minister Munilal that the decision taken by the last government and the last parliament with respect to removing the requirement for an environmental impact assessment for quarrying under 150 that when the parliament reconvenes, he has made a public statement to that effect. And I think I want to give all credit to Professor Kenny, who when he took over as chairman of the EMA, he insisted that this was a matter which we should place on the priority list. So that I am happy that the minister has agreed. I'm sure he has the approval of the Prime Minister and the Cabinet to proceed. And I think that we will solve a major problem, and that has to do with the pollution of the waterways arising out of quarrying operations.
Dr. Singh, you've been at the CEO position of the EMA since 2008.
Yeah.
Do you think the credibility of the EMA is at stake here in relation to this matter of the CECs for quarrying?
Well, I think it's recognizing the role of the EMA rather than the credibility. It's really to say you have set up an environmental management authority, give it the responsibility of managing the environment, and not place it within a context where there might be greater interest in terms of the production aspect of it. And I think this is where Minister Ramnath has indicated his desire to have it shifted to the EMA and not within the Ministry of Energy. Certainly if you are charged with the production of aggregate, you cannot be expected to regulate and control environmental issues because you might be promoting the industry. So, you know, I see it less of a credibility issue and more of you have set up organizations and let them take on the responsibility. And the decision to remove really was not based on credibility. It was based on the fact that they wished to have a clear pathway for the production of aggregate.
Yes.
And the EMA was introducing a stage which slowed that down a bit. Of course, that stage was to ensure that there was no environmental damage or little environmental damage. So we're looking forward to have it reinstated and for the EMA to move forward and address broader issues as well. I think everyone in Trinidad would call on the EMA once there's anything that has a connection to the environment.
Like tall grass and empty lots and mosquitoes causing dengue.
Absolutely, and I think it's a wonderful point you're making in terms of the EMA doesn't have jurisdiction over all these things. You have other agencies which have been set up, the Public Health Department, for example, regional corporations. CPEP has assumed a greater role in terms of dealing with some of these issues. And of course, the EMA's role is to coordinate, to deal with and to assist where we can. I think one of the areas that I would like to identify as an area that the EMA can contribute is in education and outreach. And indeed, we have had, I think, a very good program geared towards informing the public as to how to take action, even in areas outside of our immediate jurisdiction. For example, cleaning of drains, cutting of grass, issues related to even dengue, which is a public health issue. So we have contributed in the context of educating and outreach. And I think the EMA can continue and will continue in that role.
Mr. Ramnath, as someone coming into the system now as chairman of the EMA, do you get a sense that people are not fully aware of that role? It sounds almost like the ODPM situation whenever we have a pretty severe rainy season, that because it's a coordinating organization, people expect it still to do everything. Do you get that sense, Mr. Ramnath, that it's the same with the EMA, that people are not fully aware of the role of the Environmental Management Authority?
I get the impression that that people are not aware of that role, or they have very high expectation, because by definition, the Environmental Management Authority to most citizens would be that here's a body that manages the environment, and if things go wrong, then it is their responsibility. I totally agree with Dr. Singh's statement there that we don't have that power under legislation. We operate under rules which have been passed by Parliament, whether it is air, water, and soon to be noise, solid waste, and so on. And we are guided by very strict rules. However, the public is of a different perception, and I think we ought to correct that. I am concerned with, and I propose to have the board deal with some matters of expanding the role of the EMA and discussing that with the minister with respect to a number of issues that affect the public directly, and that is on the agenda for our meetings ahead in the next few months.
Would the rules and regulations and permit that sort of expansion? Because one of the other issues, as I'm sure you'll be very much aware, is the whole question of resources available to the EMA to be able to fully facilitate the requirements of any sort of expansion.
Well, I think once the government recognizes that we are in a position to react to the public concerns, and of course there are a lot of concerns expressed by the public, particularly when you have outbreaks of the type we have now, particularly when you have people who are complaining about the conditions of waterways and so on. I am sure that those resources can be made available, but we have first of all to develop an argument that can convince the minister that our role should be expanded. I don't think that they will have difficulty in allocating additional sums for staff and for carrying out that kind of work. But it's certainly people have very high expectations of us. I don't want to get involved in how they react to local government, but although local government has the responsibility under the Public Health Act, I think that they continue to call us to find out what we are doing about things that we are really not responsible for.
And that brings us back to the question, Dr. Singh, of education. It sounds as if you might be getting much more on your plate with not enough spoons, knives, and forks to deal with it. Even if you're talking about returning the control of levels of quarrying back to the EMA, do you have the resources to deal with it?
Well, there's no question, and I think Chairman Ramnath is making a very valid point in the context of expanding the capacity of the Environmental Management Authority. Certainly in the context of quarrying, we have a system set up to deal with that. But you know, we need to get more involved in the realm of enforcement. We have been involved in setting up legislation and issuing permits. But certainly at the end of the day, you have to enforce all of that. And the EMA's capacity certainly need to be reinforced to be able to do that in an effective way. I think countrywide, I think the issue of enforcement is a challenge.
It is.
And so as we go forward, you know, in the area of education and outreach, that is really geared towards changing attitudes and practices to the environment, a very, very important component. But to complement that, of course, you need to enforce using the stick, where people fail to make those adjustments, that you're having these two complementary approaches going forward. Another role for the EMA, and I know Chairman Ramnath supports this and promulgated earlier on by Professor Kenny, is the coordinating responsibility. Because the EMA has that written into its legislation, that while it may not have the capacity to do things like cleaning drains and cutting grass, but we do have the responsibility to coordinate the environmental management response. And so we are engaging in a process of building capacity within the EMA to take on that role, which we have not really done in a very effective way in the past. So I think that will help, but certainly doesn't solve the problem, because even after you have identified that, for example, the Public Health Department or the regional corporations are responsible for doing certain things, and you say to them, please, could you do this? If they don't have the capacity themselves to do it, it's not done. So I think Mr. Ramnath's point of building capacity within the EMA, if you have set up an environmental management authority, if there's a public perception that the EMA is responsible and you want the EMA to do it, then maybe a consideration is to build capacity within the EMA to take on these broader environmental issues.
But isn't that almost an admission that the systems lower down, along the way, that are supposed to do the ground level work are failing us, and essentially you are almost saying that the EMA should be a fix-it-all, one-stop sort of shop for the environment. Is that practical?
It may not be, but I think we need to look and see, you know, where capacity can be reinforced and what sensibly an environmental management authority can take on. And I'm sure that there are, you know, that there are a variety of ways that the capacity of an EMA, as it was intended, can be strengthened to, you know, further deliver on the expectation of the public. And certainly one of that area is in enforcement. I know Minister Munilal is very keen on expanding the enforcement capacity through the Environmental Police Unit. And he has spoken on this publicly, that, that while the EMA operates under a certain set of rules and regulations, as pointed out by Chairman Ramnath, the environmental police, or police generally, have jurisdiction for law across Trinidad and Tobago. And we have utilized our environmental police to enforce laws which has nothing to do with the Environmental Management Act. For example, the Public Health Ordinance, one of the areas that they can actually go and stop people from doing things. So, you know, we need to look and be more innovative in terms of how we address the issues that we are facing in Trinidad, and not always say it is not our responsibility. I know the chairman, and certainly my own conviction, is that we have to find a way, and let us think as to how that can be. We are thinking now, if we take on a more coordinating role and work closely with the other agencies with a responsibility, that we can make some headway, but it might also be building the capacity of the EMA.
A final question for you, Mr. Ramnath, and we do appreciate you being on the line with us for this dialogue. How would you respond to those who might have said, when they heard about the announcement, to those involved in the quarrying sector, saying, we have somebody on our side. Kelvin Ramnath is involved in energy, involved in drilling, involved in digging up the place, and would clearly be on our side when it comes to the seesaw between sustainable development, management of resources, exploitation of resources. What would you say to those people who would say that Kelvin Ramnath is automatically leaning in the direction of more quarrying?
Well, it has already been said by one of my critics. What I would say to them is that we will ensure that there's a fair system, that we want to encourage the development of our natural resources, but we must do so in a sustainable manner. That we are going to be fair to everyone. And I think that I'll be able to convince them that I have not joined an organization that is opposed to industrial development, whether in the oil and gas industry or in the quarrying. I want to assure the public that I am going to carry out my functions in a very fair manner.
Mr. Ramnath, thanks very much for taking the time to be with us this morning. Dr. Singh, good to get your perspective once again. And rest assured, I'll try to get the pronunciation right at the very start, and you won't have to correct me as you did this morning. Dr. Joth Singh here with us this morning. We come up now to our feel-good segment of the program. When we come back after the break, we'll invite you to share your thoughts on something that makes you feel good. 627-4106, 627-8232. So it's a feel-good moment, everybody. Not that you want to beat up on a government and say you feel good about beating up on the government or beating up on the opposition. It's something more general than that. That's when we come back.